Hi everyone, welcome to Lesson 7 of Theme 6 GCSE Geography. To clear up the confusion at the end of the last video, it turns out that the next lesson, being this one, was indeed about aid, not about water resources. So what we're going to look at today is the fact that there is a development gap between rich and poor countries. How can we reduce that gap using aid? There's lots of different ways that we give aid, and some are more sustainable and effective than others. So we're going to identify the differences between the main types of international aid. We're then going to look at what makes aid sustainable and effective, and then we're going to use that information to evaluate 3 potential ways of helping an LIC called Mali in sub-Saharan Africa. So if you pause the video here a moment, write down the title, and we'll get started. Okay, so first of all, what do we mean by aid? There are different types of aid. It falls into 2 main overarching categories, short-term and long-term. Okay, now short-term aid, also known as emergency aid, is in the event of an emergency. There's been a tsunami, there's been an earthquake, there's been a major flood, and it's designed to help people in the short term, just for a few days or a few weeks. So it might be blankets, temporary shelter, water purification tablets, healthcare supplies, food supplies. Or it might be long-term aid, for example, in situations where there's an ongoing drought and you have to keep taking water into a region or keep taking food into a region to allow people to survive. Within short-term and long-term aid, there's 3 types. Bilateral, multilateral and NGO. Bilateral is from government to government or country to country, and it's usually in the form of monetary loans. Multilateral is between organisations such as the World Bank or the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. Again, that's often in the form of money. And the thing with bilateral and multilateral is there's often conditions attached to it. We call that tied aid. So for example, there might be really high interest rates, or a government might say to another government, right, well, we will loan you the money, and in return we're going to put this amount of interest on it, and for the next 5 years you can only trade your cocoa beans with us at this price. So you're putting terms and conditions on it that quite often mean that the LIC will lose out more in the long run. The final type of aid is from NGOs, or non-government organisations, charities basically. So Oxfam, Water Aid, Save the Children, things like this. Usually this is more effective, but sometimes you do still get quite a lot of leakage. The money being produced and raised by the charities, it gets used up by the charities for travel, for advertising, for uniforms for their workers and things like that. But on the whole, NGO does tend to be better than bilateral or multilateral. Pause the video here a moment, and you can summarise it if you want, but basically get down the meaning of short-term and long-term aid, and get down the meaning of the 3 main types of aid there as well. Okay, so when we're talking about aid, what makes a good aid project? If you're going to go into a country and go, here's 100 bags of rice and 100 bottles of water, number one, that's not much, I'm just using that number as an example. But once the bottles of water have been drunk and once the rice has been eaten, they're going to need another handout. They're going to need more help. The secret to sustainable aid is to help people to help themselves. And if it's being given to low-income country communities, it needs to be small scale, simple, easy to use technologies. Pointless giving them tractors and combine harvesters and things. When they break down, they don't know how to fix them. They haven't got the money to fuel them. It needs to help directly the people that need it most as well. So money from government to government, the government doesn't always then distribute that money equally down to the people that are most in need. It also needs to be considerate of the environment. So don't go giving loads of bags of fertiliser to farmers in low-income countries, because as soon as it rains, that fertiliser gets washed off the land into the rivers and contaminates the drinking supply. So make a little subheading or bubble, sustainability of aid schemes, and then either bullet point or spider diagram these as a sort of criteria, if you like, for an aid project to be sustainable. It should meet these criteria. Okay, so for aid to be effective, in summary, It needs to be sustainable, helping people to help themselves. Therefore, it's a permanent solution. They're not going to be dependent on future handouts. And there's a saying, give a man a fish and he'll eat that night. Teach a man to fish, he'll never go hungry, is the best way of sort of encapsulating what we're trying to say here. So give them the skills to become builders. Don't build their home for them. Give them the skills to farm more sustainably so they don't exhaust the nutrients in the soil and have to deforest more areas. It's about upskilling the workers, small scale, simple technology, so that they can help themselves into the future. It's a permanent solution. So what we're going to do here is look at an example of a country that needs aid, and we're going to use Mali. So Mali is in sort of sub-Saharan Africa. It's an exceptionally poor country. It is an LIC, and here are some of the challenges that Mali is facing. So it's one of the poorest countries in the world. Most of the population of 13 million are heavily dependent on foreign aid. And the reason they need so much aid is, number one, the majority of the population is employed in agriculture. So we're talking low literacy levels. Very few people can read and write. They rely on primary industry as their main form of income. However, 65% of Mali is desert. And yet 80% of the people in the country are farmers or fishermen. So with that arid climate, you're going to get crops failing, you're going to get famine, and if the crops fail, because they're relying on cash crops like cotton, rice and peanuts, you're going to have nothing to sell. So you're not making any money to feed your family, and the economy of the country isn't making any money either. As I've just sort of alluded to, education is very poor. Less than half the population can read and write, and 60% of children do not attend regular school. The reason a lot of children don't go to school is they're needed to help work the land on the farms with their families. And it's often the young girl's job to walk 5-6 miles round trip every day to go and try and find some clean water for the family to drink. And very few continue to university. Healthcare is also very poor. Life expectancy is just 48 years. I think it's a little bit higher now. This is a little bit outdated. I think it's sort of early to mid-60s. But when you compare that to ours, which is early to mid-80s, people on average die 20 years younger in Mali than they do in HICs like Britain. And for every 1,000 live births, about 100 children die. So that's 10% of children die before their 5th birthday. That's called infant mortality. And there's waterborne diseases such as cholera and diarrhea. They kill thousands of people every year, and those are curable diseases, as is malaria. A common exam question they might give you is a data table like this, and they would ask you to infer from the data table how you know Mali is an LIC. So, on average, people earn $2,200 per year, GDP. Employment structure is here. The unemployment rate is here, and the life expectancy is here. So what you'd be expected to be able to say in an exam is, I can see life expectancy is 60 years and 3 months. This tells me the healthcare system must be poor, so people are dying younger, therefore it is an LIC. Or 8.9% of people are unemployed, which puts Mali 113 out of 217 countries in the world. This tells me that because unemployment rates are high, education must be poor, and therefore there is a high rate of adult illiteracy, or a low rate of adult literacy, therefore it must be an LIC. Or you could say the majority of the population are employed in primary industry, which tells me they don't have other skills and training, which tells me that they're not educated, therefore it tells me it's an LIC. Or they don't earn much money, which means they don't have a good job, therefore they probably didn't go to school, which tells me it's an LIC. Okay, so you'd have to infer from data like this. It could be the other way around. It might be data for a HIC, and they'd ask you, what about this information tells you the country is an HIC? So just be on the lookout. They quite like to put some data-based questions in there sometimes. Okay, so what we're going to do, now that we understand a bit about Mali's background, on the handout that goes with this lesson, there's 3 potential aid projects. One is agricultural technologies, one is water aid, and one is Oxfam Saving for Change. So 2 of these are NGOs, and this one is, I'm not sure if it's funded by an NGO or by the government or local council, I can't remember. What I'd like you to do for each one is have a read, put a summary in this box of what problem the project is trying to address. So Mali has problems with lack of with crops failing due to poor farming methods. It has problems with contaminated water. It has problems with adult literacy rates. So what problem is it trying to address, and how? So I've put an example in there for you of how to answer that one. And then what I'd like you to do on the sheet, if you're able to print it out, is highlight. Use 2 different colours or 2 different colour pencils to underline anything that would help Mali socially, economically or environmentally bullet point it in here. Anything that might mean that the aid project won't be very effective, put it in here. Okay, and as you can see, I filled in some boxes as examples for you. The key thing in the advantages and disadvantages boxes, what I'd like you to do is, whatever you pick out of the resource, I'd like you to just make some notes to elaborate why it is a downside or why it is a good thing. So for example, urban areas and LICs are very densely populated. This means, this is where I'm using my own knowledge then, difficult to lay water pipes, so on and so on. The Saving for Change tells you that they earn about $46 extra per person per year. That's from the resource, and then I'm saying, well, how far will this actually go towards improving communities? $46 a month isn't very much. And because it's a gender-specific project, yes, it's great for empowering women who often don't have very many rights in LICs, so that makes them feel more confident, it improves their quality of life. It would also double the income for a family, because mum and dad could both be earning, assuming parents are together. But it does only target women, it's only helping half the village. So, step 1, take a sideways page and draw this out. Step 2, read through the resource. If you're able to highlight on paper because you can print it, great. Otherwise, you'll have to do your best looking at it on a screen. And identify and then summarise any reasons that it would work and how it would help, any reasons that it won't work and why it wouldn't work. Okay, so pause the video here a minute and do that, please. Okay, we're now going to use this table to do a past paper style question. All right. Now then, on either of the papers, Unit 1 or Unit 2, an 8th marking question will be the highest marking question on the paper. There will be 1 on Unit 1 and 1 on Unit 2, guaranteed. And 9 times out of 10, these 8 markers also have an additional 3 SPAG marks with them: spelling, punctuation, and grammar. Okay? I don't know why that bullet point's there already. It should come up later. This one is a to what extent style question. All right? Oxfam Saving for Change is the most sustainable aid project for Mali. To what extent do you agree? Now then, it doesn't matter if you agree or disagree. The secret is in how you justify why you agree or disagree. All right? So basically what you're going to be using is the bottom row of this table to say, yeah, it's really sustainable because, or no, it's not really sustainable because, and therefore one of the other projects might be better because. Okay? So, let's take a look at how to approach a to what extent style question. First off, you must come down on one side or the other. Don't sit on the fence. That's how you get splinters in your bum. That's what my granddad used to say. So, your first sentence will always be, I agree, I think it is the most sustainable, or I disagree, I don't think it's the most sustainable. The next thing you'll do is 2 or 3 well-elaborated reasons why you think what you think. The secret is well elaborated. I think it is sustainable because this means, therefore, as a result, furthermore, in addition. What you then must do is recognise the opposite. So if you've said you agree, you think it is the most sustainable, you're then going to see, however, I do recognise it may not work because. Or if you've said, I don't think it's sustainable because, I disagree, it's not sustainable. However, I do recognise that there are some sustainable elements to it. And the final thing you're going to do is a short, to-the-point conclusion that reinforces your opinion. Now, this, in a way, is sometimes the hardest bit to do. You need to avoid repeating yourself, but you need to make your opinion clear. If you decide to disagree, so you might say, I disagree, I don't think this is the most sustainable aid project. In this part of the answer, you're going to say why you think it's not sustainable. So you're going to be talking about this box. But what you can also say in this part is why you think some of the other projects might be more sustainable. Okay, you can say, I don't think the Saving for Change is sustainable because of this and this and this. I think another option would be more sustainable because of this. And then come on to, but I do recognise there are some upsides to the Saving for Change, which would be. All right, so copy this question into your books. Feel free to put down the strategy if you want, and then give it a try. I'd say for an 8 marker like this, if you're filling more than a page and a bit in an A4 book, you're probably waffling. Write smarter, not harder. Well elaborated. Elaborate each point you make. Make fewer points, but better quality points. And the SPAG marks, remember your paragraphing, spelling, capital letters for place names, use higher level punctuation if you can, like some brackets or a semicolon, and key terms, definitely. And it should be well structured, it should flow. So use connectives like firstly, in addition, in conclusion. All right, pause it here and give it a try. Okay, so in the handouts that go with this lesson, there is a model answer. If you're able to print it out and stick it down on a sideways page, great. And I'd like you to annotate around it the things that I say. If you're not able to print it out and stick it down, then on a sideways page, write the things around the edge that I'm about to say, and next time I see you, ask me for a printout. Okay? So, first up, remember the first thing we've got to do is say whether we agree or disagree. So, I strongly agree with this statement. I think it is the most sustainable project as it has both social and economic benefits. A little introductory sentence. So now what I have to do is give 2 or 3 well-reasoned reasons why I think it is sustainable. Firstly, nice connective. Women have few rights in LICs, and this project will help them to develop their own skills and business. Mark. This would mean, so now I'm elaborating, I'm about to get more marks. They feel more self-confident, which would improve their quality of life, another mark, making it socially sustainable. Whenever a question is about sustainability, it's always quite a good idea to talk about whether it's good for people, socially sustainable, whether it's good for money and jobs, economically sustainable, and whether it's good for the environment, environmentally sustainable. Those are the 3 facets of sustainability, if you like. Secondly, the increased income, so another nice connective, the increased income for the family could be used to send their children to school, another mark. This would mean, I'm elaborating further now, that they can learn to read and write, mark, meaning they can access better jobs in the future, mark, in the tertiary and quaternary sector, key terms, and earn more money to improve their standard of living, another mark, another key term. Furthermore, so I'm making 3 well-elaborated points that justify what I think here, with a nice connective again. The money that they save in this is then reinvested in their own community, maybe spent on building a well, so there would be no need for the water aid project. Mark. This would also reduce the spread of diseases such as cholera, key term, reducing pressure on the healthcare system, another mark. What I've done here is I've said why this project is better than the others. What you might have done if you disagreed that this isn't sustainable is said why one of the other projects is better than this one. So you might have just taken the reverse approach there. So now what I need to address is the fact that I recognise the opposite. I do recognise there are some ways in which this project may not be sustainable. For example, Oxfam is a global NGO, which means that much of its money, there shouldn't be an apostrophe there, may be spent on advertising and marketing, mark, and therefore does not go directly to the villages that need it most, another mark. I've made a second point that recognises the opposite. In addition, another nice little connective. $46 per member per year isn't very much money and so may not go very far towards permanent solutions, mark, for the women and their community, meaning they could be reliant on future aid and so it may not be sustainable, another mark. In conclusion, I think it is the best option because it is a permanent solution. Nice little semicolon. Ultimately, it breaks the cycle of poverty for good by upskilling workers so they can get a better job and work their own way out of poverty, reinvesting in their own community and reducing the need for future aid. So what I've shown is I fully understand the concept of sustainability, and my answer has led me towards saying why this is the most sustainable, because it means they will never be reliant on future aid. You are helping them to help themselves. I would get 3 out of 3 for SPAG because I've got nice connectives, it's paragraphed, it's full of key terms, there's only 1 punctuation mistake there, I've got higher level punctuation here. I could have put brackets, non-government organisation, close brackets here. Brackets is a slightly easier higher level punctuation to use than a semicolon. So I've taken from the resource and I've used my own knowledge to elaborate why it's good or why it's bad. Introductory sentence, clear conclusion. So I've elaborated really well, so I get my 8 out of 8 for knowledge, and it's well structured and it flows and it's full of key terms with a sound conclusion, and paragraphing, so I'd get my 3 out of 3 for spelling, punctuation and grammar as well. What I'd like you to do, in a red pen if you have one, but if not, any other different colour, is go back to your answer and, having listened to what I've just said about my model answer, either redraft one of your paragraphs, copy one of mine into your answer, basically try to mark it out of 8, and if it's not 8 out of 8, make it an 8 out of 8. Okay, and that brings us to the end of lesson 7. Well done. If you would like me to take a look at your answer to that exam style question, then feel free to take some photos and email them to me, gleesona@hubcymru.net, and I'll get some marking comments back to you. Otherwise, I'll have a look at it next time I mark your books when we're back in school.